Hi, and welcome to the 6 weeks curriculum preview for science for fourth grade. Today we're going to briefly talk about organisms in the environment, the wetland biome part 2. As always, we use some of these key documents to do our planning and to frame our conversation. So if you don't have those with you, you might want to pause the video and get them or take a look at them after the presentation. Okay, so here's a view of where we've been this year, and we're here down in the 6 weeks for Unit 6, just kind of looking at where we were in the fifth 6 weeks. We are wrapping up producers and consumers and really looking how each of those make and get their food, looking at the flow of energy in food webs and how changes would affect those, and then looking at life cycles specifically in radishes and lima beans. This 6 weeks, we are going to be looking at adaptations, looking at inherited traits and learned likenesses, how the standard reads, and then looking at the life cycle of butterflies and beetles, and then going back and comparing those to the plants that we have looked at before. So here you can kind of see a little bit closer up view of those things that I kind of talked about. And as always, just the note on the side that we are going to be using just general biomes and environments, whatever's in STEM scopes and aims, and then at some point look and see what that looks like in a wetland biome. And like we had last 6 weeks, there's going to be 2 different options for that. We'll go ahead and move on to the pacing guide here. So we have option 1, where you have basically the 3 content standards chunked into 7, 10, and 10-day units. And as you move through the 5E cycle, as you go through the 7 days, the Engage, Explore, and Explain are focused on anything that's in aims and STEM scopes, so a variety of biomes and environments. And then when we get into the Elaborate piece, in the 5E, we'll talk about the wetlands and how that looks in the wetlands. So I've tried to visually show that by making this little wetland icon, as I did last curriculum preview, to kind of show you in option 1, you move through that 5E, but just looking at the wetland in a little piece in the Elaborate, and then moving through the other content standards. The other option is option 2, where you basically take these 3 content standards and you compact those into 4 weeks, and then you open up a 2-week project on the wetland. So this is a little bit more of a detailed view. It's very similar to how I outlined it for last 6 weeks, but just using our standards for this 6 weeks. So this is option 1. You'll see a screenshot of the district calendar for this last 6 weeks, and I just started with the first standard in the unit, which is 4.10c. We've got that scheduled for 7 days, and just a note about where I came up with the 7 to 10 days. I really look at the standard, the verbs. I look at the content and context of that particular standard, as well as where they've had it or not had it before. So you're introducing some new concepts and really going into some more abstract pieces, which is why we've got those as they are. So here you'll just see, here's that Elaborate piece where we talk about this in the wetland. And then when you do your evaluation, be sure that you're not only evaluating in the wetland biome, but your students should be able to apply that particular standard to a variety of different biomes. So here's an example of some resources then. This is that same 7-day mini unit for 4.10a. And it's going to be focusing on butterflies and beetles. And so I just went through the unit overview and pulled some resources that I thought would fit very nicely with these. So this is just kind of a suggestion of how this might look for option 1. And here you can see the icon, and there's that Elaborate piece right there. I'm not going to go through all of that, so you can pause it and take a look at that more closely if you'd like to do that. Finally, with option 1, I just want to remind you, sometimes it can be challenging to look at a standard like this first one, 4.10c, and say, okay, well, what beetles or butterflies are living in the wetland? Well, that's not necessarily the question you have to ask. So I came up with some example questions to help bridge that. And a better question might be, do the wetland plants and animals that we've been maybe looking at have the same type of life cycles as those radishes and lima beans or the butterflies and beetles that we have now. So what comparisons can we make between what we studied in the general context versus what we see in the wetland? So I just wanted to let you know that questions there that kind of help connect that are there in the pacing guide for you. Okay, so option two, as I mentioned previously, that's where you compact the standards into 4 weeks. So here are our 3 standards that we have, and I have suggested number of days for each of those. And then that, again, that opens up that 2-week option here at the end to do a more in-depth project. This is a really popular option for a lot of teachers for the 6 weeks, so they can use that extended ELAR time, because that's when their research project is scheduled in ELAR. And so that can kind of give you a big bang for your buck. You can have the science time as well as the designated time in ELAR. Okay, so as many of you use the unit overview for your planning, which is great. So just want to remind you of a couple of things in there that can help you efficiently plan and really use the best things for your students. Just again to remind you, I've got those guiding questions there focused on the wetland. So anytime you see this little icon, that's just to remind you that there's a connection there to help you bridge the standards to the wetland, as well as in side of the unit overview where I talk about approaches to classroom use. So this section is talking about adaptations, just a real quick summary of what your students have done before, and then I break it down into the key concepts and then try to illustrate where that connection can be really framed for your students for the wetland. Same thing when you get into the resources. So this is organized by standard. So if there's a great wetland connection, either that I found in STEM Scopes or Ames or EduSmart, I'll be sure to mention that. And if there's not, or if there's some additional things that need to be added, I'll put those down here in related resources as well. But there's actually quite a few things that really make some nice fits for this unit. If there's a resource that I've added that needs to be put into forethought, I just wanted to make sure that you knew where that was. Sometimes I have found some kind of overall big units or a resource that doesn't specifically align to a particular standard per se. So I put those underneath the unit overview. So if you go to the unit overview, those are going to be hung under related resources right down here. So there's a really great little booklet that I got. It's a PDF of Texas wetlands. There's a wetland line drawing, which I think would be great for your kids. Several different activities that you could pick and choose from. And then this Ames Exploring Environments is actually a book, and the whole PDF is in there, but there's a specific part that's on wetlands that I think could be really useful for you. So again, those are under the unit overview because they're kind of general resources that fit for the unit overall. Okay, just want to talk to you then for just a few minutes about the Tier 1 priorities. About 2 weeks prior to spring break, I presented to your principal about the status of the science labs, and we talked briefly about where we were with the Tier 1 priorities for science, and I know many of you use these in your PLCs, and they had asked me just to remind the teachers in the curriculum previews of a couple of ways that they could address that. So I wanted to talk about that. Specifically, we're going to talk about this component right here, following the guidelines for daily instruction and making sure that that's at least 50% hands-on in the 4th grade. So one of the ways I wanted to frame that for you was by reminding you of the tools. This is a vertical look of all of the science tools that are listed in the process skills for 4th grade. And in 4th grade, you have 25 tools that are listed. So now that we're at the end of the school year, I encourage you to go back and look at that process skill. It's 4.4a, and you'll see it in all the documents for this unit. It lists all 25 tools, and if you have not gotten a chance to use those tools with your students or have your students thoroughly understand how to use those, I would really encourage you to get those out. Maybe make a mini station in your classroom, or maybe schedule a day to go to the lab where they can have a refresher, or just go back and pick those tools back up again, because you can see 5th grade also uses pretty large number of tools too, and sometimes the tools in 4th grade are repeated in 5th grade, and sometimes that's the last time they see them, and then they are introduced to new tools in 5th grade. So just a reminder about that. The three tools that are specifically listed for Unit 6, which we're in now, is a notebook, a terrarium, and then an insect net. And you can find terrarium materials. Of course, you already know this from growing your lima beans and your radish seeds, but you have plenty of those materials in the science lab, plenty of seeds there, potting soil. And then you also have insect nets, which would be great to take out onto the playground and see if your students can maybe catch and observe some moths or butterflies or other insects. There's lots of things popping out there right now. So those are the three that are specifically listed for this unit. But like I said, if you've not gotten a chance to use some of the other ones listed for other units, now's a great time to come and pull those back in. And if you're looking for some PD to help you maybe understand what the 5E is really supposed to look like, or maybe getting more information about how to use and how to set up hands-on instruction, watch for the catalog that's going to be coming out soon that lists all the summer PD, because I will have PD that specifically hits on all the Tier 1 priorities, and I always make sure to personalize that for the grade levels that attend. So I mentioned going into the science lab and using some of the materials there, but I also want to just mention again the use of the outdoor spaces around your campus. If you have lucky enough to have a learning center that's outside, that's great, like a courtyard. I know several campuses have beautiful courtyards, but even just a regular grassy area out on the playground really has a lot of opportunity for students to see in the real world, a space that they're in every day during the week, some of the things that you're talking about. So there's some kindergarten students who are looking at some things under a tree on their campus, and then these are some 5th grade students who happened to see some ladybugs as they were coming in from their specials one day, and they took some time to look around for that. Lastly, I just want to frame what hands-on means when we talk about life science. So many times when we think about hands-on, I think teachers and students think about when they're doing like matter and energy, where they're pouring something into a graduated cylinder or measuring something on a triple beam balance. But in life science, it might look a little bit different. So I just pulled out some activities from the unit overview and just highlighted some of the verbs, which would count per se as the hands-on. So for instance, this one where they're looking at inherited traits, students observing features of adult and baby footprints. Okay, that's collecting data. That's analyzing something that counts as hands-on, even though you're looking at a model, in this case, maybe a footprint that's printed on a piece of paper, a model of a footprint, that would still really count because you're pulling in information and then you're going to do something with that information. Same thing here with this one. This is a great little activity, and it uses a dichotomous key to start classifying. That counts as hands-on. When you set up your habitats, of course, when you're setting up your habitat for your butterfly, or your plants, or measuring those plants, or recording what's happening with the growth of the life cycle in the butterflies, those are all things that counts as hands-on. So making models, those types of things are the things that we define hands-on when you get into the life sciences. Okay, so to wrap up, I just want to give you an update from TEA. On this screen, you're going to see a timeline of a project that they've been working on, and that's to look at streamlining the science standards for K through 8, and then some selected courses in high school. So in a few years down the line, we have our complete overhaul and revision of the science standards coming up. And as kind of pre-work for that, TEA really wanted to look at cleaning up some of the standards that have pieces that might be repeated or might not be needed or need to be clarified. Nothing added, but things just kind of streamlined and edited a bit. And where we are in the process right now is right here, March and April. The committee that was working on that has made their final recommendations to TEA. And TEA has put those out for public comment, so there's a window that's open for that. And then TEA will be voting on whether or not to adopt those recommendations late April or early May. And whatever adoption we have for those standards will be implemented in the 2017-2018 school year. So I've got planned a session for fourth grade to look at whatever the revisions are, that streamlining for fourth grade, and some time to plan so that you can really see how that impacts. And there are quite a few changes for fourth grade, especially in the life sciences. If you're familiar with those standards, some of them are very large and thick. They have lots of verbs and lots of context, and there's been some changes in the life sciences in particular for fourth grade. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. If you're interested in seeing what those recommendations are, I put those links back in Canvas so you can go and take a look and see what kind of changes might be adopted. And then finally, just also want to direct you back into Canvas to this s'more. I've updated this s'more from last 6 weeks, and it's got a visual guide for some of those materials that are for fourth grade in the science lab. They're just waiting for you to go down and get them, as well as some professional development opportunities in the DFW area. You know, we're so very fortunate to live in a place where we have such incredible opportunities. I just created a s'more so you'd have them all in one place. So when you go back into Canvas, you'll see the link for this. And up here is that visual guide for all of those resources in the lab. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a list of all kinds of PD that I've listed that I think would be good fits for where we're headed in the district, as well as just some quality things. And some of them are free, and some of them cost a little bit, but you can kind of pick and choose what you'd like. And as I mentioned too, don't forget about the summer PD offerings that we'll have in the district as well. So that wraps it up for this curriculum preview. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining me, and have a great last 6 weeks. And as always, please reach out if I can help support your science program in any way. Thanks so much.